Millionaire challenges humble mechanic. Fix this engine and win a shocking $50,000 salary. Tim wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands stained with grease as he crouched beneath the hood of a battered old truck. The familiar sound of his daughter's laughter drifted in from the open door of the garage, but today, it felt different. Everything changed when Alex rolled into town. The gleam of his vintage sports car a stark contrast to the worn-out machinery surrounding Tim. As he stepped out, his designer shoes crunched on the gravel, a smirk plastered across his face. "I've got a little challenge for you, mechanic," he said, the condescension dripping from his words. If Tim could fix his car in a week, he would offer him an astonishing $50,000 salary for a year. It was as if the air suddenly thickened with tension, a noose tightening around Tim's pride and desperation. Tim struggled with the decision. The challenge held the promise of financial security, a way out from under the suffocating burden of debts and uncertainty that hung over him like a storm cloud. Spending a year's salary on fixing the roof or enrolling his daughters in a better school felt tantalizingly close. But Alex's mocking tone pricked Tim's pride. He was a craftsman, not some fool to be toyed with. Yet as he watched 10-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Emma skip around the yard, their joyful innocence ignited a fierce determination inside him. Tim took a deep breath, and uncertainty coiled in his gut. He could feel the judgmental stares of Alex's wealthy friends already looming like vultures, ready to pick apart the blue-collar fool. Accepting the challenge felt like a gamble, each decision tinged with the weight of his family's welfare resting on his shoulders. He hesitated, his mind racing with internal conflict. The timeline was tight, and the stakes were high. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting Alex's terms would mean sacrificing part of his dignity, his identity as a mechanic grounded in roots far deeper than mere monetary value. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With a hesitant nod, he accepted the challenge, though dread settled deep in his chest. During late nights in the garage, surrounded by flickering fluorescent lights and the familiar scent of motor oil mingling with his daughter's crayon sketches, Tim threw himself into the work. But it was more than just an old engine he was fighting to fix. As Alex's friends arrived like a horde of locusts sneering at his grit and determination, Tim's sanctuary transformed into a battleground. Tools went missing, laughter rang out like daggers, and whispers filled the air, shrouding him in doubt. There was an urgent feeling that he was about to be forever defined by this moment, the pressure escalating with each taunt. Each hurdle a reminder of the stakes they faced. As the deadline drew nearer, Tim confronted all that divided their worlds. Each encounter with Alex cracked open the emotional wounds he had long buried, the pain of loss, the longing for respect, the unwavering love for his daughters overshadowed by crippling fears of failure. Just when a glimmer of understanding began to flicker between them, an acknowledgement of shared struggles, Alex's rival made a shocking announcement, spinning the entire competition into chaos. Time slipped through Tim's fingers, and as the clock ticked toward the final showdown, desperation surged within him. Would he prove himself, or would privilege drown out the hard-earned dignity of his toil? The stakes felt heavier than he could fathom, and as the final moments approached, only one truth remained. In a world misaligned, was his grit enough to break through? Tim stared at the disassembled engine, its complex machinery resembling a maze he was desperate to navigate. Each piece told a story of failure and triumph. But as he looked closer, he felt the weight of Alex's challenge pressing down harder than the steel beneath his fingers. The pressure was relentless, tapping into vulnerabilities he had tried to suppress. Surrounded by mocking laughter and blatant skepticism, Tim could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, a constant reminder of the stakes at play. Late into the nights, as exhaustion gnawed at his resolve, he began to examine more than just the mechanics of the engine. Each adjustment he made felt like it forced him to confront his own limitations. Tim had initially believed that his expertise as a mechanic would suffice, but he soon realized that the challenge pushed him beyond mere technical knowledge. Would the wealth of others validate him, or was there something more at stake, a reclaiming of his self-worth? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Tim sat back on his heels, tools scattered around him. He felt a pang of despair, realizing that while he was focused on fixing the engine, he was also wrestling with questions of identity. Was he just a mechanic, or was he more? Did he truly need Alex's approval to feel complete? Tim's thoughts turned inward, and he grappling with the fine line between pride and desperation. Dusk fell heavy, and a flicker of determination sparked within him. He chose to channel the scorn from Alex's friends into relentless grit. With each wrench turned, Tim began to acknowledge not just the challenge at hand, but the evolution of his spirit. It was about proving to himself that he was more than a blue-collar worker in a town that churned out wealth like a factory. In that garage, he wasn't merely repairing life's machines. He was piecing together his own fragmented identity. There were moments where he felt the repair taking shape, a bolt fitting snugly, a screw turning freely. Those small victories blossomed into motivation, staving off the darkness of self-doubt. Yet, shadows lingered. Each victory was tainted by the looming anger of his rivals. They watched from the sidelines, their jeers ricocheting off the walls of the garage until they reverberated in Tim's mind. But instead of allowing their mockery to erode his confidence, he resolved to push his boundaries further. Facing the challenges head-on, he tried innovative methods that he hadn't considered before. During one late-night session, he remembered an old trick his father used, using physics and mechanics in ways that left adversaries confused. He experimented and found solutions that not only addressed the mechanical issues, but also rekindled that father-son bond buried beneath layers of time. He began to uncover skills he had long thought lost. Fear transformed into a palpable energy pulsing through his veins. What once seemed impossible started showing signs of viability, and Tim could feel the tide of uncertainty beginning to turn. Yet, with the clock ticking down, a sense of foreboding haunted him. What if his newfound resolve was not enough? The inevitable confrontation was approaching, and Tim could see inklings of doubt creeping into his sister's smiles. They believed in him, but could he convince himself? The question tugged at him. How far could he push himself before succumbing to the weight of fear once again? The night before the final attempt to fix Alex's engine, Tim stood in the garage, tools in hand, emotions swirling like a physical force. It hit him. This wasn't just about fixing a car for a paycheck. It was about reclaiming his place in the world. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was a father who fought for his family's future. As dawn broke, illuminating his garage, he felt the determined heat rising within him. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself. Tomorrow, everything changes. The unyielding tension of what lay ahead thrummed with possibility, and Tim could taste the bitter sweetness of the challenge that awaited him. It was time to face the real battle, not just against Alex, but against every doubt he had carried for too long. What if the stakes were higher than the challenge itself? What would he discover about himself in that moment of reckoning? Tim awoke to the sound of his heart pounding in his chest, an echo of the mental battle he had fought the night before. The morning sunlight streamed through the grimy garage window, illuminating the scattered tools and the disassembled engine that had now become a symbol of his struggle and growth. Today was different. It marked the culmination of both his effort and his internal reckoning. As he prepared to tackle the engine, a potent mix of excitement and dread churned within him. He could almost hear the murmurs of Alex's friends, the continual pressure taunting his every move. Yet, he had transformed that scorn into a fire that burned unyieldingly in his gut. The question remained, would it be enough to surpass their expectations and validate his self-worth? He picked up his trusty wrench, feeling the weight of it like an anchor grounding him in reality while simultaneously reminding him of the task at hand. Each twist felt more purposeful now, infused with a sense of agency he had longed for. As he mapped out a strategy, Tim's mind began to dance between mechanic and creator. No longer merely applying fixes, he was innovating, using the experience of his father to guide his hands. It was a collaborative moment, through time a connection restarting, hammering in alongside the echoes of a shared legacy. With renewed determination, he examined each component with a meticulous eye, no longer shying away from challenges. Rather, he embraced the enigmatic puzzle the engine presented, dissecting it piece by piece. When a stubborn bolt resisted his efforts, he felt a wave of frustration rise, nearly leading him to abandon his resolve. But rather than succumb, he recalled the whispers of wisdom from old mechanics he had worked with throughout the years: patience, creativity, and the power of persistence. As he pushed through the morning, he began to notice something shifting inside him. Each successful adjustment breathed empowerment into his spirit. He was no longer just repairing a machine. He was methodically reconstructing his confidence. The thought struck him. Could it be that this mechanical challenge was simply a mirror reflecting his own journey? During a brief break, he stepped outside, letting the cool air seep into his lungs. He closed his eyes, remembering the flashes of himself as a younger man, the aspirations and dreams he had held so dearly before life pivoted him into the shadows of expectations. This moment was an act of rebellion, not against others, but against the doubts that had kept him shackled for too long. He vowed to reclaim the narrative of his own life. As the sun climbed higher, casting a relentless gaze on his work, he returned to the engine with newfound clarity. Logic and intuition played side by side, blending like oil and water until a synergy emerged. The hurdles he faced were now stepping stones rather than barriers. Each connection he secured mirrored a step toward reclaiming his narrative, drawing away from the hurtful remarks of Alex's crowd. Then came the sounds of footsteps approaching, a reminder that time was quickly running out. The crowd would soon reappear, bringing with them the anticipation of defeat or triumph. He felt the pressure creep back, only this time it was accompanied by a sense of purpose deeper than mere competition. In those final moments before he made his last adjustments, Tim took a deep breath, letting the grit settle within him. The engine was coming together, piece by piece, and so was he, a man determined to rewrite his self-image and what it meant to be a father, a mechanic, a fighter against the odds. But as he prepared to button it all up, he locked eyes with the engine's worn surface and realized the most potent challenge awaited him just around the corner. How would he hold up when Alex confronted him face to face, having witnessed his struggle? Would this rebuilt engine represent a facelift for their rivalry, or would it spiral into something more profound than either of them ever imagined? With his last wrench in hand, Tim felt the ground shift beneath him. Today was not just another day. It was about to become a turning point, a venture into the depths of uncharted territory. Tim tightened the final bolt and stepped back, surveying the engine that gleamed with new life. Each part was in place, harmoniously aligned, a reflection of his own revitalization, yet the sound of voices pricked at his focus like thorns. The crowd was drawing nearer, their anticipation palpable and stinging. Tim's heart thundered again, not from exhaustion but from the weight of uncertainty. Alex sauntered into view, flanked by a few of his friends, their sardonic grins flickering like a flame. The familiar knot of insecurity tightened in Tim's stomach, threatening to unravel the newfound confidence he had fought so hard to build. But that distraction fell away as he recalled the sweat and toil that had led him to this moment. "Nice work, Tim. You actually managed to fix that piece of junk?" Alex's voice dripped with a smugness that sliced through the air. Tendrils of doubt crept back into Tim's mind, but as he picked up the remote to start the engine, he focused on the task rather than the taunts. The engine roared to life, resonating with a power that filled the garage. Tim couldn't suppress a grin. It was more than just mechanical success. It was an affirmation of his growth. Each rev of the engine signified the barriers he had pushed through, all the mental chains that once bound him now strewn aside. Yet, as the crowd erupted with encouraging shouts, he noticed Alex's expression shift. "Let us do this right," Alex challenged, stepping forward. "If you can really fix that thing, you'll agree to a straight-up race. Winner takes all 50,000 salary. It's a simple bet." The word struck Tim like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, the stakes weren't just personal. They erupted into a full-scale professional clash. Clouds of anxiety rolled in as a myriad of thoughts cascaded through his mind. Could he really race? What if he lost? But beneath that flooding doubt lay determination, a steely resolve rooted in the courage he had summoned through fixing the engine. He stood at the edge of a defining moment, understanding that this wasn't just about pride or money. It was a chance to claim his place, to reclaim all the parts of himself he had buried beneath layers of self-doubt for too long. "Fine," he said, his voice steady despite the tempest raging inside. "I'll race you." Stepping into the circle formed by the onlookers, Tim caught himself in a sea of disbelief and support. A newfound clarity pierced the mist of uncertainty. This challenge wasn't simply about a paycheck. It was about becoming the man he had always wanted to be, an embodiment of grit, creativity, and resilience. The crowd's cheers buoyed him, drawing him closer to a realization he had not anticipated. He was about to confront not only Alex, but the very essence of the insecurities that threatened to undermine him. As they began to strategize for the race, Tim felt the presence of the engine's challenge echoing in the back of his mind. The growing fear and excitement tangled tightly together. But as they prepared for the race, he saw Alex whispering to his friends, their eyes darting back at him. Doubt began to gnaw at Tim once more. He couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation became less about the engine and more about proving himself. The tension in the air grew thick, and with one last glance down at his newly rebuilt engine, Tim realized that he had one final piece missing from his strategy. Knowledge was power, but understanding how to leverage what he had learned would be his greatest asset. Could he use his experience not just for racing, but as a tool to outmaneuver Alex? As the finishing line loomed ahead of him, the question echoed in his mind. Would this race become a turning point that finally led him to self-acceptance, or would it drag him into the shadows once again? Determination steadied his pulse, and as he strapped into the driver's seat, he felt it surge through him. The moment of truth had arrived, and behind that steering wheel lay the chance to rewrite not just his own story, but perhaps alter Alex's path as well. But in the second before the race began, lingering doubts crisscrossed through his thoughts like racing shadows. Was he ready to face whatever lay ahead? The engine's roar faded, leaving an almost tangible silence as Tim grasped the steering wheel. The cool metal felt foreign yet familiar, a bridge to all the hours he had poured into rebuilding the machine. His heartbeat pulsed in tune with the engine's idle, a rhythmic reminder of the stakes. "Ready?" Alex called out, his smirk an aggravating challenge that wrapped around Tim's composure like a vice. Each word felt like a taunt, digging deeper into his resolve. Tim's eyes narrowed. He knew Alex was relying on intimidation, hoping doubt would creep in. But Tim wasn't the same man who had crumbled under such pressures before. He took a deep breath, allowing the air to steady his nerves. "Let us do this," he replied, surprising even himself. The words emerged with a poise that felt right, a harbinger of the strength building within him. As warm-up laps commenced, Tim lost himself in the familiarity of the track, weaving through the twists and turns. Memories of that relentless determination, the hours of painstaking labor on the engine, surged forward. With every moment, he began to envision himself not merely as a mechanic, but as a competitor with a future on the line. And yet, mingling with his focus, anxiety clawed at him. He couldn't ignore the whispers of what if that encircled his thoughts like an ever-tightening noose. What if he lost? What if he stumbled on the track? Or worse, what if he let Alex win? Would it shatter the fragile identity he was trying to forge? As those worries spiraled, he pulled his focus back, recalling the grit he had unearthed during the rebuild. Failure was part of any journey, he reminded himself, but the courage to face it was what truly counted. With a determined glance at the other competitors lining up beside him, he noticed Alex's confident posture. The real battle was not simply against him. It was against the narrative that had plagued Tim for years, the notion that he was less worthy, less capable. It was time to rewrite that story. The signal lights flashed, jolting him from his reverie. Tim's heart raced alongside the crescendo building in the crowd, his senses heightening as adrenaline coursed through him. Anticipation electrified the air. This was it. A chance to assert his identity and valor. A chance to dismantle the label Alex had tried to cement in his mind. As the countdown began, a clear picture formed in his mind. It was no longer just about racing or the salary at stake. This was about asserting his existence in a world that always seemed to undervalue him. A battle against his past and the self-doubt that had become an old companion. At 0, the engines roared to life again, their cries echoing the tumult in Tim's own heart. The race launched forward like a jolt of lightning, and with the first acceleration, Tim felt himself merging with the machine, a harmony built on trust and commitment to become more than just a bystander in his life. But as he shot forward, gaining momentum, he couldn't quell the doubts that fluttered at the edges. What if Alex began to play dirty? Or worse yet, what if Alex's crew had devised a plan to sabotage him? Even as he wove deftly through competitors, navigating the course with newfound agility, he realized that every corner, every turn, mirrored his mental landscape. This was not merely about speed. It was an intricate dance of precision, patience, and strategy. The finish line pulsed on the horizon, but a tense thought burrowed into him, one that could disrupt all he had built. Was it truly Alex he was racing against, or was it himself? Each moment ahead could redefine not just this day, but the very essence of who he was becoming. Preserving the fragile confidence was only part of the equation. As they approached the final stretch, Tim realized clarity came in unexpected forms. It was as much about trust in his ability to confront shadows as it was about crossing that finish line. Would he conquer Alex? Or was there a greater adversary lurking within, challenging him to embrace the victory of self-acceptance? The answer lay ahead, shrouded in the chaos of the race and the trial of his own making. The world around Tim blurred as he accelerated into the first turn, intuition guiding his hands. A rush of adrenaline coursed through him, yet within that fervor lay a calculated focus. The roar of competing engines melded into a singular symphony, urging him forward. Each lap was more than just a race. It was a gritty testament to his transformation. He was gaining speed not just on the track, but within himself. The fear that had clung to him earlier faded, reshaped into a powerful resolve that surged with every successful maneuver. Outmaneuvering other contestants, he noticed Alex beginning to lag behind. The sight ignited a flicker of triumph, yet it was quickly overshadowed by a sudden jarring reality. Was he truly shifting the narrative, or was this merely a fleeting moment in a cycle of self-doubt? Tim could not afford to indulge that persistent whisper. Instead, he tightened his grip on the wheel, steering through a succession of curves with a commanding precision he had once doubted he would ever achieve. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was a force of nature, rewriting his past with every calculated turn. But with darkness always comes light, and it wasn't long before Alex surged ahead, pushing the limits of both his machine and Tim's mental state. The challenge presented a renewed question. How would he respond? Would he succumb to frustration, relinquishing the hard-earned confidence, or would he rise to the occasion? Facing not only Alex but the self-imposed restraints of insecurity, Tim glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of Alex's determined concentration. The smirk that had unnerved him earlier had transformed into a fierce, almost desperate ambition. Tim felt an involuntary rush of anger mixed with ferocity. He would not allow Alex to dictate his potential. Knowing this was about more than winning, this was a moment to redefine his self-worth, he pushed his mind into overdrive. In an empty stretch of straightaway, Tim saw an opportunity. Briefly aligning his breathing with the purr of the engine, he remembered the revisions he'd made to his car. Everything he learned during the rebuild came flooding back, a cascade of problem-solving strategies igniting within him. Each adjustment he had implemented, every late-night calculation came into play. The machine felt like an extension of his ambitions, and he allowed himself to embrace that connection wholly. Accelerating into the next corner, he leaned into the turn with a newfound trust in himself. But the very foundations of confidence were fragile, and a sudden flash of doubt skittered through his mind. What if he made a miscalculation? What if he pushed too hard? Tim wrestled with the impulse to heed these mental obstructions. The applause of the crowd illuminated the thrill of the chaos around him. He could feel the enthusiasm buoying him, stoking the fire inside. The final straightaway approached, and he pushed everything beyond mere instinct. He was on the brink of something profound, the culmination of months of arduous labor, doubt, triumph, and now, a chance to pour it all into this fleeting moment. But even as he hurtled forward, another consideration crept in. What did victory mean beyond the race? Would winning this challenge soothe the turmoil within him, or merely subdue it temporarily? As he approached the finish line, he realized the true test lay not solely in the competition with Alex. but in reconciling his identity against the remnants of his past. With his mind locked on the finish line, Tim roared toward it. There was no turning back now. Only the impending collision of who he used to be and who he aimed to become. Would he finally emerge on the other side as the man he aspired to be, or would old fears claim dominance once more? The moment loomed, pregnant with possibility, as everything hung in the balance, creating an undeniable tension that crackled in the air. Tim's heart raced, not just from the velocity of the machine, but from the wild, unshakable uncertainty of the revelation yet to unveil itself. Tim crossed the finish line, a blur of exhilaration crashing into him like the aftermath of a thunderstorm. He didn't just win. He achieved a milestone, rippling through the depths of his own expectations. The roaring crowd dissolved into a distant echo as he exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Victory wrapped around him, heavy yet liberating. As he struggled to reconcile the moment with the weight of what it truly meant, he climbed out of the car, his heart still pounding, and felt the familiar embrace of sweat-soaked adrenaline. But instead of cheers, he was met with a silence that felt deafening. Alex, once a rival, now stood before him, breathless and resolute. Admiration mixed with something else. Was it respect? Or perhaps a hint of vulnerability that Tim had not anticipated? The face of competition became an inkling of brotherhood, a connection forged in the heated battles of both ambition and self-doubt. "Nice race," Alex said, an uncharacteristic honesty imbued in his voice. They stood face to face in the shadow of the grandstands, the harsh fluorescent lights illuminating their every flicker of emotion. "Thanks," Tim replied, a thin smile spreading across his lips. The relief that washed over him was undeniable, yet shadows of uncertainty flickered beyond it. What would he do now that he had emerged victorious? He wanted to bask in the triumph, but as Alex's hand clapped his shoulder, Tim felt a tug of introspection anchoring him back. Beyond the accolades lay questions echoing in his mind. What if this was it? What if victory did not herald transformation, but simply prolonged his conflict with self-worth? Would this win erase doubts or merely overshadow them? Over the following weeks, the race replayed in Tim's mind, each lap etched into a mental reel. He didn't go back to the garage with a sense of superiority or a bloated ego, but rather with a firm commitment to challenge himself further. He began experimenting with new modifications on the car, pushing against the boundaries that had previously restrained him. Each tweak became a testament to his resolve. Each test drove a battle against the mental hurdles he still faced. But soon, murmurs of a significant opportunity reverberated through the local racing community. A wealthy investor was on the hunt for raw talent, the kind that could not only drive, but innovate within the sport. Curiosity piqued. Tim dove headfirst into preparations that extended beyond mechanical designs. He read about the best drivers in history, analyzing their methods, philosophies, and approaches. He even sought advice from seasoned professionals, conversations that amplified his knowledge and confidence. Yet, the prospect of this opportunity brought forth its own blend of anxiety as he realized he would soon find himself thrust into the arena of expectations, where wealth and recognition could either cleanse his insecurities or amplify them. Was he ready to present not only his skills, but his very being to someone who would judge him by the same standards that had haunted him for what felt like a lifetime? As the day of the selection approached, Tim found himself in a vortex of emotion. Excitement intertwined with doubt, anticipation battling with the nagging thoughts he fought to silence. When he looked in the mirror that morning, he did not see just a man who had won a race. He saw a canvas of potential ready to paint its own future, but also a reflection that held echoes of past failures. The moment had come to transition from a mere participant on the racetrack to a contender in the world of professional racing, a world where the stakes were life-changing. He took a deep breath, locking in his focus one last time. This was not simply about the race or the salary that awaited him. It was a deeper test, a leap into the unknown. Deep down, he knew that this moment would reveal far more than his skills behind the wheel. It would demand he confront the very essence of who he was. Would he seize the opportunity, or would past fears launch an ambush? As he stepped outside, determination thrummed in his veins, the world looming before him as both a challenge and a promise. But amid the rush, he felt the familiar whisper threading its way back. What if he failed? The battle within was heating up, and now, the true test awaited. Would he stand tall in the face of uncertainty, or would he allow the shadows of his past to diminish the brilliance of his potential? Stepping into the sun-drenched lot, Tim took a moment to inhale deeply, the crisp air invigorating his senses. He could hear the distant revs of engines and the muffled cheers of spectators filtering in from the main raceway. It felt like the calm before a storm, a deceptive tranquility hovering over the tumultuous emotions roiling just beneath his surface. The tension that gnawed at him mingled with an odd sense of purpose as he approached the cluster of sleek cars. The voices of fellow mechanics surrounded him, energized, confident, while his own internal dialogue raised brutal questions. Would they see through his facade? Would they recognize him as a true contender, or merely a fleeting moment of glory? The pressure of expectations felt like a vice, tightening with each step that as he walked towards the designated area for the upcoming selection. Tim spotted the investor, a man in a tailored suit, exuding authority and confidence. The investor's reputation loomed over the racing community, a heavyweight whose nod could make or break careers. Suddenly, Tim's heart raced, not with exhilaration but dread. What if he stumbled? What if analysis turned to disapproval, and anticipation morphed into disappointment? The thought was suffocating, but he had prepared too long for this moment to retreat into cowardice. He could not allow untested fear to control him. He took his place among the hopefuls, all of whom were adorned with the trappings of success, smiles brimming with bravado and chatting nervously, discussing strategies as if no self-doubt crossed their minds. Each animated exchange intensified the clarity of his solitude in a bustling room. Here in this circle of talent, he felt like an outsider peering into a world he yearned to conquer but feared he wasn't worthy of. The investor began his assessment, firing questions that dissected each candidate's resume of experiences and ambitions. Tim listened carefully, admiring how the others articulated their journeys, weaving tales of resilience and success. When it was finally his turn, he felt the weight of countless eyes penetrating him, dissecting every nuance of his being. "Tell me about your philosophy on racing," the investor prompted, expectantly leaning forward, evaluating every word as if it were a stock trade. With his heart pounding, Tim spoke. Unfamiliar words slipped out seamlessly, a stream of thoughts he had toyed with during quiet moments spent alone in the garage. He spoke of the marriage between man and machine, of the thrill in harnessing not just speed but innovation. He drew from the intricate changes he had implemented on the car, linking those mechanical decisions to the vulnerability of pushing one's limits. For a brief moment, he shed the heavy cloak of doubt and embraced the confidence that radiated from his own voice. Behind the polished facade of the investor, an unexpected gleam sparked in his eye. Tim noticed. Could it be he had struck a chord? This realization illuminated a pathway previously shrouded in shadows. As the interview continued, a deeper layer of stress adopted its crown, pressing against Tim's composure. Behind the verbal exchanges lay unspoken questions of worth and validation. He had long craved recognition, not only as a competitor, but as someone who could impact the sport. As he wrapped up his thoughts, the subtle grin from the investor suggested that perhaps he was recognized. But just as quickly, doubt snaked back, and was it enough? Would this moment finally free him from the paralyzing grip of fear that had tainted his passion? Outside, the sun began to sink lower, painting the sky in hues of red and gold. As if the universe aligned with his turmoil, these colors mirrored the internal struggle brewing within him. Another mechanic started to engage him in friendly conversation, breaking through the whirlwind of his thoughts. Yet, Tim realized this was not just about competition. It was a test of his character. The pivotal moment loomed ahead. Results could be minutes or hours away. Would he embrace this new chapter and transform the shadow of his past into a beacon of opportunity? Or would he retreat into doubt, allowing this chance to slip through his fingers? As the evening wore on, he stood atop a ridge overlooking the racetrack, the roar of engines below resonating with the beat of his heart. Within those chaotic sounds lay an awakening. The choice was his to make, and the true race was beginning to eye in the back of his mind. A singular thought emerged, pushing him to confront his hesitation. If failure was the worst outcome, what would that truly mean for his journey? Tim's thoughts swirled in a tempest of anticipation, but the evening light softened the harsh edges of his anxiety. He glanced down at the hustle below. The mix of mechanics tinkering with their cars felt chaotic, yet strangely reassuring. It reminded him that every one of them, like him, fought against their own doubts and dreams. Yet among all the noise, he remained acutely aware of the absence of clarity in his mind. As he descended from the ridge, he resolved to channel his nervous energy not into fear, but into focus. The investor's approving glance had ignited a flicker of belief, and now, Tim was determined to fan that spark into a flame. He needed a plan, and to explore this nascent confidence that was just beginning to emerge from within. Reaching for his phone, he opened up an application that logged his modifications and strategies from previous races. There was his own journey. Each entry dissected mechanics and ideas, revealing layers of his thought process that had previously escaped him. As he scrolled, he recognized moments of innovation, of risk-taking, and of stubborn persistence. If those decisions had led him to this point, why not build upon them? Feeling a rush of empowerment, Tim steered himself towards an empty workbench behind the bustling teams. He set to work, focusing on the car assigned to him for the competition. Adjusting the tuning controls required precision, a skill he honed over years of striving for excellence. Yet it was more than mere mechanics. This was an opportunity to embody the confidence he had just discovered. The smell of fuel and the clatter of tools became a meditative backdrop as Tim immersed himself in the task. Each adjustment felt like an act of defiance against his doubts. He meticulously recalibrated the suspension, a mod that could improve other candidates' chances of achieving victory. With newfound resolve, he envisioned how enhancements could elevate an unremarkable engine to elite performance. For those hours, self-doubt was a distant specter. Each bolt turned became a conversation with himself, reminding him that every small victory counted. The rush of triumph flowed through his fingers. The adrenaline of creation overshadowed the fear of failure. Just as he secured the final components, he heard footsteps approaching, a shadow falling across his workspace. He looked up to find the investor, flanked by the lead mechanic he had noticed earlier. The investor's presence was commanding, and Tim felt a jolt of anxiety pierce the veil of his concentration once more. Impressive work, the investor remarked, studying the changes below. Here was validation immediate and tangible. Yet, coppery doubts danced at the edge of his thoughts. Was it enough to dazzle someone whose opinion could alter the course of his dreams? Thanks, Tim managed, his voice steadier than he felt. I've been focusing on optimizing the performance. Noting the investor's piercing gaze on the modifications he implemented, Tim felt compelled to explain, a reflexive attempt to tether his ideas to the acknowledgement he so desperately sought. This setup minimizes weight while maximizing agility. It's, a careful balance of speed and control. The investor nodded, though the silent appraisal unnerved him. Tim's heart pounded, not just from apprehension, but from a stronger desire to impress. Here he stood at the intersection of potential and fulfillment, where one decision could redefine his career. Can I see how it holds up? Maybe a few laps tomorrow? The investor asked suddenly. Sure, Tim replied, though he felt the gravity of the moment ready to crush him. The mere thought of showcasing his work invited a flurry of consequences. Success meant liberation, while failure could mean falling back into the shadows. As the investor walked away, Tim had a fleeting moment of clarity. This wasn't just about racing. It was a challenge posed to his very essence, weighing his past against a future he longed for. But with night settling in and uncertainty still swirling within him, he knew greater challenges were yet to come. The engine he had just optimized now hummed like the heartbeat of opportunity. But could those internal adjustments manifest in a hope that held the potential for lasting change? He realized then that tomorrow was not merely about racing, it was about confronting his deepest fears and doubts head-on. As he prepared for the trials ahead, a thought echoed. Was he ready to prove not just to others, but to himself that he truly belonged in this world? Or would he crumble when the pressure peaked? Tim stood in the bustling pit area, the fragrance of gasoline filling the air, mingling with the nervous tension that hummed from the throng of competitors around him. This was at the culmination of all his toil, the moment where he would transform from a mechanic into a recognized contender in the racing world. Today would define him as he walked to his car, now a finely tuned machine that symbolized so much more than just a vehicle. It was an embodiment of his growth. He had poured every bit of his experience, creativity, and determination into its revamp. With each meticulous adjustment, he had rebuilt not just the engine, but also rebuilt his shattered self-esteem. Tim's heartbeat thumped synchronously with the engine that roared beneath his fingers, resonating with newfound confidence. As he prepped for the qualifying laps, a crowd began gathering, their expectant chatter filling the air. Tim took a deep breath and centered himself, remembering the challenges he had faced in that garage, the late nights, the self-doubt, and most importantly, the vulnerabilities he had exposed and ultimately overcome. Those moments of clarity had forged a deeper understanding of himself. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was a fighter. With the green flag waving, Tim launched off the starting line, flames of adrenaline igniting his sense of purpose. Every turn, every acceleration became a testimony to his determination. He pushed the boundaries of his skills, not just racing against the clock, but racing away from the remnants of his past. The track was a metaphorical reflection of the curves and obstacles he had encountered throughout his life. As the laps progressed, it became apparent he was not merely a mechanic at the mercy of luck. He was the architect of his own destiny, and he reveled in that power. Competing alongside seasoned racers, Tim felt his resolution fortified with each straightaway. He was dismantling the insecurities one lap at a time. When he finally crossed the finish line, the victory was not merely for the time he recorded, but for the triumph over a lifetime of self-doubt. Cheers erupted around him, but it was the validation that shot through him that truly revived his spirit. As the dust settled and the crowd rushed forward with enthusiasm, he saw the investor grinning from ear to ear. The sense of approval hung in the air, tangible and electrifying. "Impressive work, Tim," the investor remarked, clapping him on the shoulder. The gesture felt weighty, transformative, and as the realization of acceptance coursed through him, Tim understood this moment was not the end but the launching pad for greater achievements. Setting down the trophy and basking in the congratulatory remarks, he reflected on what he had truly achieved. This was more than recognition from an investor. It was affirmation of self-worth that had eluded him for far too long. He had conquered not just the race, but his inner battles as well. No longer confined to the burdens of perception, he realized he had earned his place in this world, rooted firmly with both humility and pride. Tim's reputation surged. He began to receive invitations to participate in more prestigious races, each competition serving as a testament to his expertise and unwavering tenacity. Not only was he performing mechanics at the top of his game, but he was also innovating strategies that thrived in the racing community. Through this vibrant evolution, Tim took time to offer mentorship to young, aspiring mechanics, sharing both technical knowledge and the invaluable lessons he had learned on resilience. He became an advocate for pursuing authenticity, teaching the next generation how to transform fear into fierce determination. Months passed, and as he stood on the podium after winning a significant race in the national circuit, his daughters beamed with pride and awe in the audience. Lily and Emma cheered, their voices cutting through the noise, wrapping him in warmth. He lifted the trophy high and felt an overwhelming peace. "I am more than what others see. I am a father. I am a mechanic of machines and minds, and I can accomplish anything I set my heart to." The internal metamorphosis was profound, expanding far beyond trophies or accolades. It was a journey that had brought him face to face with his true self, an empowered man who now understood that worth comes from within, and no external validation could overshadow the resilience he had uncovered. The light of a new horizon dawned ahead, and as Tim stepped down from the podium, he was not merely a champion in a race. He was finally a champion of his own life, having conquered the lingering echoes of inferiority with undeniable success. It's time for you to embrace your own journey. Don't just watch, subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your growth. Leave a like now if you're motivated by personal triumphs that redefine potential. Comment below your reactions and theories about Tim's transformational journey. What does it mean for you? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these powerful actions.